Hi guys, and welcome to your first PowerPoint of the year for biology. This PowerPoint covers the structures of biomolecules. We have already introduced vocabulary in biology, so you might already have an idea of what the word biomolecule means. If we break it down, bio means living, molecule is just a small particle or substance. So if we put it all together, it's just a small particle or substance that is present in living things. So for this PowerPoint, you're going to need something to write with to fill in the notes as we go along. I'll stop and I'll tell you which one we're on, and you will fill in the blanks of the notes as we move through. All living things need energy and nutrients. Energy and nutrients. If you look at the first blank on your notes, question number 1, what do all living things need? We're putting number 1, energy, and number 2, nutrients. Most organisms get their energy and nutrients from their food in the form of biomolecules. So they get it from their food. Number 2, question 2, where do living things find the nutrients that they need to survive? And you are going to write their food. So below we have proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and lipids. They are the 4 main classes of biomolecules, and there is a picture of each on this slide. This is not on our notes, but in this PowerPoint we'll be exploring these 4 different biomolecules and getting to know a little bit more about them. Three out of the 4 classes of biomolecules are classified as polymers. That's a really important vocab word. Sorry about moving the screen. Okay, polymers. Polymer, question 3, what is a polymer? You need to know that a polymer is a long molecule that are made of very similar, repeating monomers. So there is a word missing here. You want to add the word at that. So question 3, what is a polymer? They're long molecules made of very similar repeating monomers. As I mentioned, 3 out of the 4 of the biomolecules are polymers, and there are the 3 listed below: nucleic acids, proteins, and carbohydrates. And you can just see here that they're just made of repeating units. Another unit, another unit, another unit, right? Another unit, another unit, another unit. So just long molecules made of very similar repeating monomers. There is one type that is not classified as a polymer, and that is lipids. And we will be talking about these a little bit later in this presentation. When we say polymer, we are referring to the whole molecule. What would you call this entire object above? So, keep doing that, I'm so sorry. What do we call this object above? Hopefully you said it's a chain. Chains are like polymers. Chains are built of smaller, repeating, identical units. So if you look at this chain, you have a unit here, you have a unit here, you have a unit here, and so on and so on. We are going to talk about what these are. These are links. A polymer would be like the entire chain. The link would be like the monomer. Mono, one, poly, many. So a chain is like a polymer. If you look on question 4 of your notes, what are polymers like? And you want to go and write the word chain. Polymers are like chains. So again, when we say monomer, we are referring to the individual piece that keeps repeating. A monomer is the individual link. When I put many links together, I get a long chain. That's a polymer. So the overall chain is the polymer, and the one link is the monomer. So that is one of our important vocabulary words. Make sure you know mono is one, and know poly means many. I'd go ahead and write that on the side of your notes so you have that information. Individual links, monomer. When I have a lot of those links together, I have the whole chain, and a chain is like a polymer. Okay, so what do we call the individual pieces of a chain? That's the link, that's the monomer. Question number 5 on your notes, what would a monomer be like in the chain analogy? So the monomer would be the link. Another type of chain is the monkeys. In this example, which would be the monomer and which would be the polymer? Remember, mono means one, and poly means many. So which is the monomer? Hopefully you said it's the individual monkey. So there's one. Another individual monkey, there's another monomer. Another individual monkey, another monomer. And which is the polymer? It's the whole chain of monkeys. Okay, so there's no notes on this slide. It's just to give you another example of the monomer polymer. Individual link, individual monkey, that's the monomer. Whole chain, or the whole chains of monkeys, that's your polymer. Many repeating units. In this slide, we're talking about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the first type of biomolecules we are going to take a look at today. Every time you see the word carbohydrate, it's going to be colored pink in this class. It's just a way to help you remember a carbohydrate and know where to find them in your notes. We will color carbohydrates pink when we do our review in this class. So look at the picture here. It's the same picture that's in your notes. To me, a carbohydrate looks like rings holding hands. So we have a ring here, and then they're holding hands, and another ring, and they're holding hands. So we just have these rings linked together. They're holding hands, they're linking together. Each of these little units, right here, the first one circled in pink, is a monomer. So each unit is just a simple sugar. So carbohydrates are made of sugars. A large molecule is a complex carbohydrate, and the monomer is a simple sugar. Just repeating units where these rings are holding hands. So when each simple sugar holds hands, when they're linking together, they form a complex carbohydrate. So on question number 6 on your notes, what are complex carbohydrates made from? And your answer would be simple sugars. Let's add an S. Simple sugars for number 6. So just remember, carbohydrates are made from simple sugars that are joined together just like links in a chain. So every link is the monomer. So here in carbohydrate, that's a sugar. And the whole entire chain was the polymer. So now we're looking at that whole large molecule, and that makes up a carbohydrate. So another name for carbohydrates are called saccharides. This is a really important term since you will see this on the star. So carbohydrates are also known as saccharides, but also know that carbohydrates are made up of sugars. So when I think of carbohydrates, I think of the S words. We have saccharides and sugars. So we have some important terms below. We should know the prefixes. By now, hopefully you know mono is one. So right here we have one simple sugar for monosaccharide. Mono is one. Saccharide just means sugar. One single sugar. Disaccharide. Di means two. Saccharide means sugar, so we just have two sugars together. An example could be like fructose or sucrose. So usually that ending OSE means a sugar. We have polysaccharide, and that just means many. You can see a whole lot here. Probably looking at something like starch. It's really big. Poly, many, saccharide, sugar. It just means more than three, many. And oligo is a special term because that one just means not too many, but not too few either. So it means several, it means a few. And it's usually associated with four. So we're looking at four sugars here. Okay, so know those terms. Mono is one sugar. Disaccharide, di means two. Saccharide, sugar. Poly is many, and so we have many sugars linked together. Remember the whole unit, the whole chain, is a carbohydrate. That's the polymer. Many units linked together. And if I just look at an individual guy here holding hands with this other ring, the individual rings are the monomer, which is your simple sugar. So look at question 7 on your notes. What is another name for carbohydrates? And go ahead and fill in saccharides. So the second type of biomolecule that we're talking about are proteins. You can see here that proteins are blue. So when we talk about proteins, when we go back through and review or anytime we take notes, we want to label it blue, just like carbohydrates are pink on our slides and in review. And it's just a way to help you remember each biomolecule, associate it with a color, and find it easier in your notes. So proteins are made of amino acids. Amino acids are these groups that you can see. Go ahead, there's one circled already. Notice how there is an N here. So each amino acid has to have an N. So there's another individual unit, that monomer, which is the amino acid. And then here's another one. And another one. I'm just going to go ahead and circle all of the individual amino acids that I see. So each one of those circles, that's an amino acid. And when you string all of them together, you get a large molecule, and this is called a protein. So your protein is your polymer. It's made of many repeating units of amino acids. And amino acids, they look different because we have 20 different amino acids in our body, and so these R groups are just symbolizing different ones. But what you need to look for is every protein has a nitrogen, and that kind of tells us that we're looking at a protein. So number 8 on your notes, it says, what are proteins made from? And go ahead and answer amino acids. Number 8, amino acids. And take a look at that picture above question 8 on your notes. It's the same picture that you see here. I would like you to circle some of the same units that I circled so you can see the individual amino acids. But be careful, everyone has to have nitrogen, so make sure you're circling between, the technical name is the carboxyl group and the amino group. But this is one here, so just circle it kind of how I have it, being mindful that you need the nitrogen in each one. Every protein has a nitrogen. Proteins have another name. They're known as polypeptides. So we've already talked about that prefix poly, meaning many. So we're talking about many peptides. Well, what's a peptide? We haven't talked about that. So the bond that holds the amino acids together in a protein or a polypeptide is called a peptide bond. So let's go ahead and circle all of those individual links, those monomers. And remember, every amino acid has to have that N, and that is just a symbol for the element nitrogen. So we have all these repeating units of amino acids, and we put them all together and we make a protein, or another P word, polypeptide. Okay, so the peptide bond is just the link. It's the bond that's holding these chains together. So these amino acids here are held by this peptide bond, and these two amino acids are held by this bond. It's right between the N and the C, right next to the nitrogen, and just repeating bonds. So when we say polypeptide, it's because we have many bonds, many peptide bonds. Moving on to the third type of biomolecules is nucleic acids. And you can see here that we are going to color code nucleic acids as yellow. Don't get confused. We're not saying that nucleic acids are actually yellow within a living system. It's just a tool to help us associate the term nucleic acids, yellow, and help you find this biomolecule in your notes a little bit faster. So just like carbohydrates and proteins, nucleic acids are also polymers. They're made of repeating units. Nucleic acids are made of nucleotides. So question 10 on our notes, what are nucleic acids made from? And you would go ahead and answer nucleotides. So if you haven't noticed, we talk about carbohydrates and we said saccharides and sugars. So those S's go together for carbohydrates. And then we talked about proteins and we said polypeptides. So protein and polypeptide both start with P. Now we get on to nucleic acids, and their monomer, their single unit or link, is called a nucleotide. So nucleic acid starts with an N, nucleotides start with an N. So here in yellow they have one unit circled. It's called a nucleotide. We can circle another one, and we can circle another one. A nucleotide is made of 3 parts, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit. But go ahead on your notes. The same picture here is above question 10. I want you to circle a few so you can realize that the individual link here is the nucleotide. And when I put many nucleotides together, when they link up, when we get into this chain, now we see a nucleic acid. So here on this slide, we're giving some examples of nucleic acids. DNA and RNA are the 2 main types of nucleic acids. So if you look at your notes, question 11, what are the 2 primary types of nucleic acids? And you want to go ahead and write DNA and RNA. You probably heard of DNA. Get that from your parents. It makes up who you are. Well, the DNA is the genetic material. It's made of nucleic acids. Same thing, RNA. It's a genetic material made up of nucleic acids. So question number 11, what are 2 main types of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA? And then question number 12, what key component of all cells is made of nucleic acids? And that is our genetic material. Just to give another little preview, another type of nucleic acid would be an ATP molecule. And so we have this ring structure just like you see down here. That's our sugar. And we have a nitrogen base just like our picture down here. And And what the ATP molecule does that's a little bit different than DNA and RNA is, just like its name, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. So hopefully you know that tri means 3. It just means it has 3 phosphate groups. So the more phosphate they have, the more energy it has. What ATP is when you go and eat your food, you have to convert that into a usable form of energy. So that gets converted into ATP, and when your body needs energy, it'll just break that apart and use up those phosphate groups. So that's another type of nucleic acids, just so you get a little preview, because you will need to know that. Okay, so you will be responsible with knowing the 3 parts of a nucleotide. Remember, a nucleotide is the monomer of nucleic acids. So we're just looking at one individual piece or one individual link. So nucleic acid is the polymer, but again, we're looking at nucleotide, the individual link. So there are 3 basic parts to every nucleotide. You do need to recognize these. In green, phosphate group. So here's our phosphate group. And then the second basic part is a sugar. So we've been color coding carbohydrates pink. So here's our sugar. This is DNA, so this sugar's name is called deoxyribose. And then blue, we have a nitrogen base. Remember, nitrogen kind of tells us that that is a protein. So nitrogen base. So go ahead and look at your notes. We're on the back. We're on question 13. Every nucleotide in DNA has 3 parts. Go ahead and write number 1. It has a phosphate group. It's the circle in green. Number 2, it has a sugar, and sugars are always in ring structures, and it's pink here, and that one's called deoxyribose because we're looking at DNA right now. And it has one of the 4 nitrogen bases, and we'll get into that, A, T, C, and G. Make sure you label this here on your notes. There's a picture right next to the 3 parts. Go ahead and write that in. So our last category of biomolecules that we're talking about today will be the lipids. Lipids are the only type of biomolecules that doesn't follow the polymer-monomer structure. This group, the lipids, are a group of biomolecules that contain fats, cholesterol, and phospholipids. And it also contains waxes. So go ahead and look at your notes. We're on question number 14. What are some of the main types of lipid molecules? And you want to go ahead and write what I underlined: fats, cholesterol, phospholipids, and I'd go ahead and add waxes as well. So remember, lipids don't follow that monomer-polymer structure. Lipids are not polymers. They are not made of repeating chains, repeating units, repeating structures. They are just made out of 2 parts. In the green here, you have your glycerol. So right here in the green, that's a glycerol. And that's the head of the fat. So lipids are called fats. And then you can see these hydrocarbons, and they just look like tails coming off the end. This one has 3 tails. And those tails are called fatty acids, and that's in the blue. So on your notes, there is a picture above question 14. I want you to label it. I want you to put a big rectangle around the green part. That's the head of the fat, of the lipid. That's a glycerol. It's all down here. And then the tails, there's 3 of them here. Sometimes there's just 2, but there's these tails that come off. And those are called your fatty acids. And then go ahead and label that whole picture right underneath it, right above question 14, say fat. Lipids are fats. So all 4 classes of biomolecules, our proteins, our carbs, our lipids, and our nucleic acids, they're considered organic compounds. And that doesn't mean like when you go to the store and you buy your organic fruits and vegetables, but in science, the word organic means that they are all based on the element carbon. And carbon on the periodic table is represented with a C, just like nitrogen is with an N. So look at your notes, question number 16. Why are all 4 classes of biomolecules considered organic? And that's just because they all contain the element carbon. So right there's your answer for 16. Okay, and for our last slide, we just need to go and talk about some important vocabulary. We're looking at number 17 on your notes. Okay, and for our last slide, we need to look at some important vocabulary that you'll see throughout biology. Cells do some things where they build up and they break down molecules. So our first one, number 1, all of the biomolecules can be broken apart or digested. So digested means to break apart to obtain their building blocks and the energy inside of them. So in our picture here, we have this chain. This is a nucleic acid made up of these nucleotides, right? So we have the monomer, and when you digest something, you just break it apart. So here, this arrow just means it's being digested, and that polymer is now broken down into the individual building blocks, which are known as our monomers. Okay, so digestion, to break apart. Number 17, define digested, and you're writing broken apart. Biomolecules can also be built or synthesized. Important word, shows up every year on the star. Can be built or synthesized. So the word synthesize means to build up, to make, to create. By the cells to complete certain tasks and store energy for later use. So here, now we're starting at these individual pieces, the individual building blocks, or the monomers. And we're going, and the arrow is showing us that we are synthesizing it, we are creating, we're building up. And we're making a nucleic acid here, which is the polymer. So we just put them all together, we synthesized, we made a nucleic acid. At the bottom of your notes, I need you, question 19, we're going to have to get the definitions for the word catabolic reaction. And then the second type is an anabolic reaction. So I need you to go and add number 19 and number 20, catabolic reaction and anabolic reaction. A catabolic reaction is like number 1. It's a chemical reaction inside of cells that break down materials. So catabolic reactions break it down, like 1. So this is a catabolic reaction. And an anabolic reaction are chemical reactions inside of your cells that build new molecules. So that was number 2. We synthesized these building blocks into this molecule, which was the polymer. And I'll go ahead and make sure that's on the board too, so you can just get that jotted down. Catabolic, to break apart, anabolic, to build, to synthesize. Make sure you have up to question 20. And then just make a quick note here. This catabolic and anabolic, this digested and this synthesized, these are just opposite reactions. So one breaks apart and one builds, complete opposite.